Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1959's Invisible Invaders, directed by Edward L. Kahn.
Within 3 days, the dead will destroy all the living. I am from another planet, outside your galaxy.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
Unless Earth surrenders in 24 hours, we will begin a mass invasion. We are invisible. We are invisible, Adam Penner. You cannot see us.
From outer space come the invisible invaders, living dead men threatening to destroy all life on Earth.
The advent of the atomic age opened a lot of doors that many people felt were better left closed. The fear generated by the atom bomb was incredible, especially when it was revealed that the Russians had successfully constructed one. The explosion of the suburbs was a direct result of this fear. People felt safer living away from the city, figuring that the major cities were all potential targets, and the farther away from them they could move, the better. American ingenuity found a way to prey on these fears, and fallout shelters became a big business. I remember as a kid seeing an episode of The Twilight Zone called The Shelter. During a party for Dr. Stockton, the radio announces that UFOs are headed for the town and everyone should take to their shelters. The doctor, being the only one in the neighborhood prepared for the worst, takes his wife and son into the shelter and locks it up. His neighbors beg to be let in, but the doctor refuses as there are only enough air and provisions for the three. Panicking, the neighbors bust in the door, and as they attempt to take over the shelter, the radio announces that the supposed UFOs turned out to be satellites. The neighbors apologize for their behavior, but the doctor realizes that the experience has destroyed their previously close friendships. That episode had a profound effect on me, and it lingers to this day. At first, I dealt with it as a child would, not really understanding the bigger issues raised by it, and it just scared me that people could be so barbaric when it came to survival. Later in life, however, it made me consider something else, especially in the aftermath of 9/11. A very good friend of mine was deeply disturbed by that and told me he was considering just packing up the family and everything we have, moving out to the mountains and shooting anyone who comes within 500 yards of the place. He was a good shot, too, and I didn't doubt that he could put a bullet in someone's head from that range. He asked what I would do in that case, and after thinking about it, I replied that I couldn't do that. More to the point, I didn't think I would be able to do that. It reminded me once of a friend I had, now unfortunately deceased, that suffered from cystic fibrosis, and any sickness, even a common cold, could put him in danger of dying. He was, understandably enough, I think, obsessed with his health, and when AIDS hit, he became absolutely paranoid about it. I felt very bad for him. He was an amazing musician and artist, but he spent most of his regrettably short life with that sort of Damocles hanging over his head. It made me think about fear and how it doesn't do to be so afraid of the end of life that you neglect to live it. Now, don't get me wrong, I am just as apt to leap into a blind panic at the end of the world as anyone, and I'm not about to claim that I'd be the sole voice of reason during that time. I'd like to think I would be, but chances are I'd be blowing holes through any perceived threat in sight. This brings me to the subject of the zombie apocalypse. Watching things like The Walking Dead, which is one of the best portrayals of a zombie apocalypse I've ever seen, and of course the George Romero Dead series, just scared the living hell out of me. Deliciously scared, as Anne Shirley would say, because the threat isn't real. There was recently a lot of media flack about some dink killing a guy and eating his face, and of course the alarmists sent up the zombie apocalypse rocket. I know it was nonsense, of course, but still, there was that lingering childhood fear running around in my head like a small rat let out of its cage. Dead bodies are scary. Reanimated dead bodies are terrifying. And that brings us around, finally, to the subject of tonight's movie. Invisible Invaders concerns aliens who 20,000 years ago invaded the planet, quote unquote, of the moon, destroyed its inhabitants, and have been living there ever since. They conquer the planets they invade by their ability to make themselves and their spaceships invisible, and now they have set their sights on Earth. I dealt with the issues of invisibility in the intro for The Amazing Transparent Man, but for those of you who may have missed that particular rant, let me recap it briefly. What good would it be to have an invisible army since they'd be running into each other and shooting each other because they can't see their comrades who are also invisible? And if your weapons were invisible as well, how would you be able to find them if, for instance, you set it down so you could take a leak? The aliens in this film seem to have worked that problem out, however. They found a way to possess the dead bodies of humans and use them as transports and weapons. They've ignored us up to this point because we weren't a threat, but with the advent of atomic technology, they've changed their minds and have decided the time has come to conquer or destroy. They possess the dead body of a recently killed scientist, Dr. Carol Neumann, and get in touch with his closest friend and fellow atomic scientist, Dr. Adam Penner, commanding him to deliver the message to the powers that be in Washington: surrender or face complete annihilation. Dr. Penner, understandably shaken by his best friend, whom he buried that very day paying him a visit, does as ordered, but of course the government dismisses him, in print no less, as a total crackpot. The aliens take matters into their own hands by causing a plane to crash, reanimating the corpse, and having it interrupt the radio broadcast of a hockey game to announce their intentions. When that doesn't work, apparently no one of any importance was listening to the hockey game, they take over the body of a car crash victim and interrupt the broadcast of a football game. This gets the message across, but none of the nations will surrender, so the invaders inhabit a whole bunch of dead bodies and attack. An aside here. They only possess the bodies of men, and all of them look like they just came off the set of Mad Men. You'd think they would have taken over the bodies of women as well, but I suppose they're all male invaders and can't walk in high heels. Anyway, Dr. Penner, his daughter, his assistant, and bluff Army Major Bruce J. hole up in an impregnable laboratory, once again in Bronson Canyons, and go to work trying to defeat the invisible invaders. This is actually not a bad movie. A friend of mine, Metal Steve, approached me at a local club, and having seen my show and knowing my story of useless knowledge concerning movies, asked me if I knew of a movie he'd seen as a kid and never forgot. All he could remember was the title. All he could remember of the title was the word Invaders, and at first I thought he was referring to 1953's Invaders from Mars. I mentioned that as the possible title, and he said no, it was about dead bodies getting reanimated, and I said Invisible Invaders, and he just beamed. I mentioned that I just happened to have a copy of the film and was going to put it on my show, and would he like me to lend it to him? He did, so I did. I just hope it lived up to his memory of it. Director Edward L. Kahn was born on February 12, 1899 in New York City. He directed 125 films as a contract director for MGM, learning his craft directing the disastrous Our Gang shorts made by MGM after the Hal Roach Studios sold the property to them. He worked in just about every genre at MGM, from westerns to horror films. Among his films are 1947's Voodoo Woman and 1958's It, The Terror from Beyond Space. Edward L. Kahn died on August 25, 1963 in Hollywood, California. John George Agar was born on January 31, 1921 in Chicago, Illinois. During World War II, Agar was an Army Air Force physical instructor, and in 1945, he married America's sweetheart, Shirley Temple, and was soon put under contract by independent producer David O. Selznick. Tiring of people accusing him of using his wife's fame to land a career, he used to introduce himself by saying, "Who wants to shake the hand of the first man to put it to America's sweetheart?" His first screen appearance was opposite John Wayne and Henry Fonda in John Ford's 1948 classic Ford Apache. He and Wayne became very good friends, and Wayne saw to it that he got steady work. Agar and Temple divorced in 1949, but his movie career continued unabated, although he was shunted from A films to B films, making many appearances in MGM and later AIP films of the 50s, including 1955's Revenge of the Creature and 1957's The Daughter of Dr. Jekyll, which really creeped me out when I was a kid, thanks to the looks and performance of Arthur Shields, who was just downright scary looking. When asked if he resented doing B movies, Agar said, "I don't resent being identified with B science fiction movies at all. Why should I? Even though they were not considered top of the line for those people that like sci-fi, I guess they were fun. My whole feeling about working as an actor is if I give anybody any enjoyment, I'm doing my job, and that's what counts. To me, the idea of just working is what's fun, and I don't give a doggone what kind of part." Walter Houston said it years ago, "I don't care about billing. If the show is good and I'm good in it, people are going to say, 'Who was that?' And if it's not, I don't want them to know I was in it." Agar was admittedly a workmanlike actor at best, but he always turned in a good performance no matter what the quality of the movie. In his later years, he was a staple at horror movie and science fiction conventions and always glad to meet old and new fans. John Agar died from emphysema on April 7, 2002 in Burbank, California. Jean Byron was born Imogene Burkhart on December 10, 1925 in Paducah, Kentucky. She began her career in radio as a teenage singer, continuing to pursue work in entertainment when her family moved to California, where she continued making appearances on radio and expanding into stage work. She appeared in 84 movies and TV shows during her acting career and is probably best remembered for her role as the mother in The Patty Duke Show. She was a very pretty woman and soon landed a contract with Columbia Pictures, beginning her movie work in 1952's Voodoo Tiger, a Jungle Jim adventure with Johnny Weissmuller. Small roles in films such as 1953's Magnetic Monster and Serpent of the Nile convinced her to start acting on TV, where her roles improved. She appeared on many TV westerns, including Yancey Derringer and My Friend Flicka. Her flawless complexion and girl next door good looks led her to becoming a spokeswoman for Revlon Cosmetics and Lux Soap, as well as landing a recurring role as Dr. Imogene Burkhart on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, which led her to landing the role of Natalie Lane on The Patty Duke Show. After that show was canceled, she appeared sporadically on TV and did a lot of theater, appearing as Mama Rose in a stage production of Gypsy. She retired from acting in the 1980s, but appeared in the 1999 TV movie Still Rockin' in Brooklyn Heights, a reunion of the cast of the original Patty Duke Show. It was her last television appearance. Jean Byron died from complications of surgery on February 3, 2006 in Mobile, Alabama. All in all, Invisible Invaders isn't a bad movie. The effects are crude and the use of stock footage is pretty obvious, but it's used well. For instance, the footage of the plane crash was shot from an Army film shot when they were experimenting with remote-control planes, and it looks really good to the point of being kind of alarming. The car crash, the same one that was in Mad Men from Mandoris, was lifted from 1958's Thunder Road, a better movie. Stock footage is the great savior of low-budget movies. Production value, as the kid in Super 8 would say. But when you watch a lot of these movies, as I do, you begin to recognize stock shots that made the rounds a lot, and it gets a bit annoying. Even still, a zombie businessman in the movie can be kind of nightmarish, and having John Carradine in a film always adds a little something to it. So right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy Invisible Invaders right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.